And welcome, everyone. We are talking with Clody now, and we're talking about how a scientific approach to the Bible, where you don't have to check your brain at the door, where you can come in and discuss things and intelligently consider that you don't just have to walk into biblical faith with blind faith. Does that kind of summarize where you're headed?
I just want to repeat what I said.
Good.
Decades earlier, decades earlier, many people that believed in God ruled out science, and many people that were scientists slash intelligent people, brainy, they ruled out believing in God. They were atheists.
Yep.
While it came to pass that a third point of view came, thank God, and people started to understand that believing in God doesn't rule out science, and vice versa.
Yep.
Being scientific doesn't rule believing in God. And I think this is an analogy of what we as a study group, as a Horeb Institute, are doing with documentary hypothesis. I think that we are not ruling out the Bible with having in regard the documentary hypothesis.
Yep.
The reason, and that's because I was thinking my mind trip years like 3 or 4 years earlier when I ran to the documentary hypothesis. I was hating it
Yeah.
because any time that I heard of it, I heard the mocking behind that.
Yep.
Like, look at how the Bible is stupid, and people that believe in the Bible are stupid, because if you study the Bible and you see that there are different sources, then you understand that there is a contradiction. So you understand that that's not the word of the God. So you're stupid.
Yeah.
So, and that made me really not uncomfortable. So I think that what is happening now in this study group is like the third point of view in blending in between science and God, because you can still be respectful of the sources, and of course you cannot rule out God and believing in God if you start seeing for real what is happening with the text and with the sources.
Yeah.
And yeah, more or less that was it.
No, I really like that because it fits me, it fits you. I know it fits most who are with us today. I mean, I for years
But another.
I
Mhm.
knew of the documentary hypothesis. I knew of the academic approach to the Bible, but without ever looking at it, I was very critical of it. And I said, well, those people don't believe in God like I believe in God. I'm not going to entertain the idea that the Bible was put together by men. I don't care how smart they were. It just, I didn't want to look at it. So, but now I'm willing to entertain these ideas and consider how did we get the Bible, which I love and seek to live my life according to.
Mhm.
Yep.
Also, I wanted to say that even if the Moses scroll is a theoretical pillow that makes us comfortable to study the documentary hypothesis, or the Bible, having in mind the documentary hypothesis sources.
Yep.
I think that's a very an enlightening way that God is putting us in front of us, is the light of God making the tunnel lighter. We can see light,
Yeah.
more light that we used to see, and that's of course God's blessing. And I believe that doing that with modesty and with God reverence, I think that and I hope and I pray and I have faith that God will really give us some big blessings.
Yeah.
And also, I wanted to read that little that little verse in Micah chapter 7, and it's verse 5. Trust no friend, rely on no intimate, be guarded in speech with her
Ah.
who lies in your bed.
Ah. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yep.
For sons first mother, daughter rises up against mother, daughter-in-law against mother-in-law, man's own household are his enemies.
Yep.
So I think that is this was a class of modesty, of being humble, of searching, of praying, and of having reverence and real modesty in how we try to be deeper and wiser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just and I want feedback, particularly from this group that knows me the best, that spends the most time with me. I never want to come across as arrogant or forceful of an idea. I recognize that some of what I say is very challenging to people, and I don't want it to come across as dismissive or, something which is mean or anything apart from the love of the Bible. And I'll tell you, in Richard Elliott Friedman's book, Who Wrote the Bible, one of the things that he spends a lot of time on in that introduction is he tells us that for him, this is a love of the Bible, and it's all about understanding who wrote it. And so it's never, and he said anyone who would use this to do what you were just describing, Clody, where you're making fun of or you're being ugly about the Hebrew Bible, he said that is not my intent, and they're not doing what I'm doing here. Well, that's the way I feel about it. And I know that some people who listen to me on Saturday mornings, where we're taking a very academic, critical approach, they might look at me and say, well, this guy doesn't even have a relationship with God. He doesn't believe in, this is my life. I wake up in the morning and I'm trying to understand these texts and I'm searching for God. And so I'm with you. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. I want them to know that we are in this for the very reasons you just said. And you don't have to check your brain at the door. And like I said, we've got very scientific people that are with us in this quest. Totally different than maybe what the group that I knew 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. I'm so happy to be around people who are digging into this with me that it just I walk around with a smile on most days just because of this. So
We have the same smile when we think about any class that you plan on teaching and you talk. So thank you.
was good to be with you guys then. Clody, anything else before we go to the next person? Or okay? Hang around. You probably got some more stuff to add. James Brumgard. Hey, James, how are you?
Good morning, Ross, and everyone else. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly well. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well. I wanted to bring out a couple things, but I'm going to bounce off of what Clody just was sharing with us. I had an earth science teacher, I believe it was eighth grade in school, that he was a Sunday school teacher, I believe, not at the church that I went to at the time, but he said he uses science as how to figure out how God did what he did, not trying to disprove God or, he wasn't so in the, I guess you're trying to say that, any discussion that might sound evolutionary wasn't denying that it was created that way. So just how the design got transferred or something along those lines. But the thing that caused me to raise my hand initially is when you start, I'm going into your Genesis study book
Yep.
on 208. It talks about well, I guess when the J source introduces his information about Joseph being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and he was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, or Zilpah, excuse me, and he brings the evil report. I don't think that event is the same event as when the brothers decide to put him in a pit, because if Reuben and Judah are there, they're not mentioned as, they're sons of Leah,
Yeah.
not. So I think that's a separate event, just to maybe introduce the thought that these brothers, at least some of them, had their reasons to want to get back at Joseph.
Yeah. Good
Besides
point.
all of his extraordinary dreams and that he was sharing, as Clody was saying, maybe sharing too much. But anyway, of course, when you're young, you don't necessarily have that wisdom to temper what you might want to share, if you will.
No, good point. In fact, if I can just say one thing, if you read that first part where Joseph is 17 and he brings this bad report of his brother to the father, Rodney brought up a few minutes ago, and it's got me still thinking, in verse 5 where it says Joseph dreamed this dream. He told it to his brother, and they hated him even more. Well, and the question is, well, where does it say that the brothers hated him? Well, it could be, and this is all, it's a hypothesis. We're testing it. But in J at the beginning, the report that we just said, where Joseph gives a bad report on his brothers to the father, it's almost implied that probably got under their skin. They probably hated him for that, and they hated him even more when he has these dreams. So different
Yep.
event, yes, but yet still caused a little bit of anger.
Yep. So anyway, I was just, because sometimes I guess if you read this maybe a little more casually, you're inclined to look at, oh, he's talking about, the brothers were with the sheep, and he goes back again, and that's when they throw him in the pit. It's probably a different occasion.
Yeah.
I'm sure the brothers were rotated in and out of the flock. Plus, they would have been older men by then. They may have even had wives
Yeah.
at that point. And so it wasn't always the same group of brothers with the flock. And there may have been more than one flock, too. That's the other thing you have to consider.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to overgraze an area if you have a very large flock. So
good point.
Anyway, those are my thoughts. That's all.
No, it is a good point. You think about it, it may have been, if you have, I mean, I don't have that many kids, but even with 6, you kind of put chores up on a rotation. Like you probably would say, okay, Bilhah, you and Zilpah's boys, you guys, you 4, I need you to take the sheep out, and then maybe a different month it's somebody else. Or so it's a good thing to think about too. How was the work distributed? Good stuff.
Yep.
All right. Well, come back up if you got something else.
Will do.
JJ, Shabbat Shalom, brother. How are you?
Shabbat Shalom. All right. Hey, thank you for the class again. This is always great. I guess when you were talking with Clody, it just made me think that I've mentioned before that maybe I think the documentary hypothesis may be fanciful, but I'm not dismissive of it. I think what you're doing, how you're breaking it down, and I know you're putting things together from different sources that are already on the street, as well as things that you're just gathering together as you're studying. So,
Yep.
One, I want to say that I do really appreciate where you're working. If nothing else, it's a great way to break down the stories, to try to understand the stories. And, if that's what, kind of how documentary hypothesis, if that's what it does for me, then, hey, I'm happy with that. I'm happy. I want to understand the text better. And, it's just, we may never know how the Bible was put together, but there's
Amen.
books out there, and I think that this is a great discussion. So I love what you're doing. And, I'm not smart enough to refute or confirm any of the stuff you're saying, but, I study, and I just I appreciate the group that we have. I just think it's amazing, when we're all I think we all feel free here to share how we want to share.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. So I just wanted to add that in there.
Well,
Go ahead.
I didn't want to cut you off, but I want to say something to that. If I jump in now, am I cutting you off?
Nope. I have a second point. So
Okay, well, hold the second point, because I tell you, the first thing that I want to make clear is I'm not totally convinced about the documentary hypothesis either. And let me just say, Rodney just brought up, see, maybe none of us are smart enough to figure out how the Bible came together, but collectively, all of us can have some insight. So believe it or not, Rodney gave me some work to do today, because I look for those kind of things. So for instance, when you see you've got sources separated out, and some of you may not have been here for that, or you may have missed that, but just in a nutshell, it says in J that the boys hated him all the more. And you go, well, you would think if you have the word more, you would have said, and the boys hated him before that. Well, that creates a question: do we have the sources separated correctly? And the answer to that is, I don't know, maybe. Here's the other thing. There are other theories other than the documentary hypothesis that I am considering too, because here's what happened. This is a model that it came from Graf and Wellhausen, but others, German scholars, primarily in the 19th century. But I'm reading works that were written in the 19th century where Graf and Wellhausen, they learned from scholars prior to them who had slightly different views. And by the way, my shelf behind me has some theories that scholars today would say exactly what you did, that said, okay, I see we've got some sources here, but I'm not sure that the documentary hypothesis is the way to best explain it. So I'm open. In fact, there is a hypothesis that is slightly modified off of the documentary hypothesis that I really like, and I'll be talking more about that. But I want people to know, and then I'm going to throw it back to you in a minute, but the reason I put this book together, believe it or not, is because I wanted a notebook for myself. It really started like that. This was a PDF. Like I just wanted something. Then we realized that we could share it with other people and use it like a textbook. But I want people to know that the documentary hypothesis remains one of the top scholarly hypotheses. And it's at least good for us to know whether we accept it or not, because it does share. And sometimes we look at it and I go, wow, I think they may be right here. And other places, maybe not. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on and on, but I wanted to agree with you that there is, it's worth looking into and shooting down if we have to. Feel free to say, I just don't buy that here.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Hey, so the other thing is just because I have some software that I use for Bible study whenever we're talking around, and we so kind of off the documentary hypothesis subject, I was looking at the passages that we were digging into today from I'm just looking at my notebook here, from Genesis 37:3 and 27, where he's talking about that coat of many colors, or Katonet Pasim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just looked it up, and I was like, yep, it's only found 2 places and basically 2 stories in the Hebrew Bible, right? Mm-hmm. And then I was like, how does that look in the Septuagint and the LXX, right? Because I was like, where do they get coat of many colors thing?
Yeah.
So then I did see in the Septuagint they do use the this word poikalon, a tunic of various colors or various in the Septuagint there.
Okay.
And that's used, I don't know, like 25 times they use that word. But the interesting thing I thought, in which includes the story of Jacob when he's stripping down the reeds to mark those sheep.
Yeah.
Back in Genesis 30. It includes that use in that paragraph. But the thing that I thought was interesting, that when you brought the Tamar story, how her coat, it uses just a long-sleeved tunic. the same as what it uses in the Hebrew to match the Joseph's coat story. So I just thought that was interesting, and yeah, that's so.
Well,
I just wanted to share that piece.
Yeah, anytime I come across a word or a phrase that's used in maybe just a very limited number of places, first of all, it's the way I study and try to understand what a word or phrase or story is trying to tell me. Is I look for a similar application of words or phrases, and do we see a consistency? Do we see a pattern where we find this particular usage? Anyway. So I really dug into this Cote Note Passim, and here is a note. If everyone has the patience, it's just a paragraph, but this is from the Anchor Bible Dictionary, Genesis. I have an old copy. I don't think it's been revised though. But anyway, on page 289, if you have this, it's translated an ornamented tunic. And it says the traditional coat of many colors and the variant coat with sleeves are sheer guesses from the context, nor is there anything remarkable about either colors or sleeves. The phrase, the Hebrew, ketonet pasim, occurs aside from this section, also verses 23 and 32, only in 2 Samuel 13:18, where it describes a garment worn by daughters of kings. Cuneiform inventories may shed light on the garment in question. Among various types of clothing listed in the text, is talking about cuneiform, there is one called a kitu or kitinu pisanu, and it gives an academic journal reference. The important thing there, besides the close external correspondence with the Hebrew phrase, is that the article so described was a ceremonial robe which could be draped about statues of goddesses and had various gold ornaments sewed onto it. Blah, blah, blah. The Hebrew phrase pasim would be an adaptation of Akkadian pisanu, a technical term denoting ornaments on costly vests and so forth. So anyway, it is believed in the ancient Near East to represent something that ties to royalty, and that would at least fit in our story in 2 Samuel, and maybe something Joseph really wants to set his youngest boy apart and make him loved by his brothers.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a prince's jacket. You want a prince's jacket, son?
I'm wearing a princess shirt.
Hey, there you go. Purple. Yeah,
I love it.
That was
All right.
perfect
Thanks,
timing.
Ross.
All right.
Yeah.
Good deal. Hey, let me, I'm going to bring Karen up in just a moment, but I'll say years ago when I was working in industry, one of my manager had come out of a meeting, and I had 30 some odd people on a shift, and he had 5 biscuits left over from a meeting, and he said, "Hey, man, won't you take these 5 biscuits out and give them to 5 of your employees and make you 5 friends?" I said, "That's not the way the world works, man." I said, "If I take 5 biscuits out and I have 30-something employees, I'm going to make 25 enemies, man." So it's the same thing with this jacket. You're not making one son feel great. You're making 11 or 10 or 11 sons feel horrible, and all of those boys are going to really not like little Josie. All right. Karen. Hey, Karen, how you doing, my friend?
Good.
What
Can
you
you hear
got
me?
for us today? I hear you.
Oh, I just have some questions. Did I hear you say that Joseph was 6 when Benjamin was born?
I didn't say that, but I'm trying to think what I might have said that might make you think I said that. I hate math. I mean, I don't know.
Weird. I don't know why I heard that today.
I don't know.
With
Now
Anywho.
I'm going to have to look. I hate this. I'm going to have to go look and see. I don't know that we know. I don't think that we have any information that gives us that level of detail.
Maybe it was going off of when Rachel died.
Yeah. No, I know in the text which describes Rachel's death, I don't think we have that information. But now I'm going
Okay.
to go back and look.
Do we know how old Joseph is when he has his dream about his parents and brothers bowing down to him?
No, don't know that either. But it's another good question. There we get limited. We have a 17-year-old Joseph. I know that some of you listened to Jonah and I worked through some of this on our Torah Pearls session, and we know that he's 110 when he dies. And then between that, we can find certain things that give us clues, but it's like very few and far between that we get the age. So it's we're left to speculate on a lot of that.
Okay. I know. I was just wondering, if he has his dream, shortly after Benjamin's born and he's young, is he some little 7-year-old coming out at dinner saying, "Oh, I dreamed this," and they're all laughing at him?
Yeah, it could be. And there's nothing like, and I know that as a mother of multiple children, there's nothing like the older kids teaching the younger kids lessons on what not to do. So we see that around the dinner tables in our own homes. I have plenty of examples, you probably do too, where the older ones, just whoop up on the younger ones to train them. It's part of that life process.
Yeah, I think even his dad and mom were like, really?
Yeah.
Nobody was real excited about his dream.
Yeah.
So it makes me think that he might have been pretty young.
Well, we do. If we follow the story, we're introduced in 37 to a 17-year-old. And as we work our way through, I guess one idea would be that he's at least 17. There could be a break between introducing him as a 17-year-old and the dream. So is he 18, 19, 20? We don't know. But he's at least 17, I guess, is one idea we would have. So maybe.
I was just wondering. Because I know sometimes kids, when they're little, they have kind of big dreams and they'll tell their parents without thinking anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Joseph certainly hasn't read anything on how to win friends and influence brothers. He's certainly got some room to grow up, and he does. That's the beautiful thing about the text, is it shares with us the beauty of how life he learns through the things that he suffers, if you will, and turns out okay in the end, at least is the way we read it. But good stuff.
Anywho, I was just wondering.
Okay. All right.
I've always wondered, how old is he when he starts having these dreams? And
well, it's an important question, and I think those are the kind of things we want from the text, even when the text doesn't give us those things. So, you have questions when you read these stories, and I think that's the right way to hit them, is you go, well, does it tell us? And if it doesn't tell us, then can we get kind of a maybe a general idea of how old he is? And that's one thing that I'm starting to do now, and we're especially bringing it out in the Torah Pearl session. Jonah and I both, we're looking at, okay, if Isaac is 180 when he dies and they bury him, how old are the boys? They're 120 years old, right? We don't get that if we don't really read it closely. So you're doing it the right way by looking for those kind of details. So.
And then one more thing I was wondering, the source that tells the story of the slaughter of the men of Shechem, is that the same source that is where Judah's the good guy?
In 34 is the slaughter at Shechem, and that is Jay. All right.
Okay.
So there is, what does all that mean? Again, to JJ's point, first of all, it's a hypothesis. We're testing it. Do we see consistency with a certain figure who rises to the top? And that's one of the things that the scholars have found when they separate these sources is there is somewhat of consistency. Like we looked at a little bit today where, where in the dream, Joseph talks about, he dreams about his mother and, his mother and dad, and you go, well, she's dead. Well, not in that source, she's not. That's a different source. So it's important to see. Seth and I are working on a couple of other things. One thing that we're going to do, God willing, in 2025 is we're going to put out J, just J, E, just E, and that way people can read the whole story. And, you can see, even though you can do it with these Torah tablets, it's nice to have the individual stories because then you can really make some observations, which either advance the theory or shoot holes in it. Either way. Good stuff. What else, Miss Karen?
That's it.
Well, hang around.
A lot of reading of Joseph, but a lot of it's extracurricular and doesn't necessarily apply. So,
well, hang around in case you get some more insights. You always have something from what you've read, so I'm looking forward to it. Good stuff.
Gotcha. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom. And Damon. How are you, Damon? Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Doing pretty well.
Good.
Finally got my internet sorted out here and I can connect properly.
Outstanding.
So, one of the things I'm coming into this portion brand new, where I hadn't looked at it in terms of sources before. By the way, I'm getting Friedman's book later on today in the mail, so
good.
I'm actually going to be looking at it.
Good.
But on my initial reading, when you separated out the sources, my first question that came to mind was, okay, how do we know which source is which? How did they separate those sources out? What criteria did they use? Because they're not even using the name of God in the text.
Yeah. You're going to see a lot of that when you read Friedman. You'll get some of the background on that. And it is number one, it's a fascinating study as to how they determine the different sources. Sometimes it's when you see, if you read it as a whole, let's throw the sources out for a moment. You read chapter 37 and you go, hey, wait a minute. Do the Midianites get him out of the hole? Or, oh, wait, no, this says the Ishmaelites. And so they're looking at the Hebrew or the English or the German, as the case might be, and they begin to peel the sections apart where you go, wait a minute, it's like a matching game. You're like, what if I take the sentence here, this verse that says the Midianites, oh, here's another one, Midianite, oh, here's another one, Midianite, and you go, wait, here's one where Judah is trying to save Joseph. Oh, here's one where Joseph is, and they separate. The other is vocabulary. Certain words and phrases are used almost consistently that match. And one more point, and then you'll have insights when you read Friedman too. But if you back out of 37 and you look at other passages in the Pentateuch where clearly, let's use two namings of changing the name from Jacob to Israel, where the name is used, and you begin to take those and you peel those apart where it's more likely, more easy to determine a potential different source, right? And then you find within that certain words and phrases, and you find those in certain sections of text like 37. That's how they got some of that.
Okay. So, looking at, for instance, I think it was Genesis 17 and 18, where we're looking at the two different stories on the foretelling of the birth of Isaac. And you can very clearly see, okay, there are different literary emphases here.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that and it's like, okay, that does look, I wouldn't say that's necessarily two different sources, but there's something going on there, definitely.
Yeah.
Here
right.
I'm like, okay, I can see where it looks like a confused jumble and just separating things out topically might make sense. But that still begs the question, okay, how do we know that one is E and the other one is J?
Yeah, it really does come down to consistency of sources. And again, though, Damon, to your point, some make more sense than others, and you say, you know, I could almost buy this thing, but I don't think they're right here. In fact, I see James is on video here. He's got some time with us this morning too. He and I have discussed certain passages that like James might say, you know, I just don't think this is P, or it just doesn't feel like so. But this is the scholarly world that we're entered into. Kind of going back to some of the things that Clody was saying, we're entering into a long-standing debate, and some scholars don't accept. A lot of scholars, I don't want to say a lot, but there are some scholars who say, you know, that documentary hypothesis is not an accurate way to define the composition of the Pentateuch. They buy into another theory. But here's the thing. All of the debate in the scholarly world is pretty much forced to contend with, if they have a different view, it is to do exactly what you just did, Damon, and compare it to, I see the way the scholars have divided chapter 37 into E and J, but and like you said, I see something's going on here, but I'm not sure they're right on the division. But you're doing it the right way. You're entering the argument with the scholarly decision that the documentary hypothesis is that which must be challenged.
Right. And in the spirit of looking at both sides, I also made a book recommendation on the Discord for a scholarly book which basically deconstructs the documentary theory and says, wait a second, here are some problems, some of which stem from originally right from Bauhausen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look at both sides. I'm going to see whatever I can see.
Excellent.
I did have a thought on Joseph's mother and the comment about that in the text.
Yep.
Because it does appear that whatever the case may be, Benjamin was born before the family got back to the land of Canaan. And Joseph's dream happens after they're in the land of Canaan. So Benjamin's already born, Rachel's already dead. So that you can't fiddle with that sequence of events. However, if we're going to look at, okay, well, if Rachel is dead, who could that be talking about? And my first thought was, what about Leah? That she's not technically Joseph's mother, but she could most certainly be his adoptive mother and taking care of him as a mother. So just a thought there.
No, you're doing what we love to do here, and that's look at the possibilities. Let me back up to one point you made. The question about Benjamin's birth, where does it take place? Karen asked, when? Do we know when? Well, we can kind of get a little bit of this, but let me just say that it depends. Like, where was Benjamin born? Well, it depends on which verse you're reading. I'll give you an example. So if I look at page 198 in the Genesis tablet, which is Genesis chapter 35, and we can begin in verse 16. And they journeyed from Bethel. There's still some distance to come to Ephrat. Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass when she was in labor and so forth. We know the story. Okay, so verse 19, Rachel has baby Benjamin in Beit Lechem, Ephratah, or as the Hebrew, that's the Hay directive. So it's towards Ephrat, Beit Lechem. That's where she has Benjamin. Everybody knows that. Beit Lechem, Ephratah, there you go. But turn the page, and that's E, by the way. Turn the page, and you're in P, and it lists the children of Israel that are born. Okay, the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, and Levi, and Judah, and Issachar, Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph, Benjamin. Sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan, Naphtali. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad, and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob that were born to him in Padan Aram. So according to verse 26 of Genesis 35, all the kids are born in Padan Aram. There's no story in P about a birth of Rachel that happens once they're in the land. Now, some might say, well, you're being a little bit too picky there. Hey, I'm going with the text. I want to go with the text and see what it
Right.
says. So
Yeah, I get what
again,
you're doing.
yeah. So it's worth considering, though. But we're on the same page in that we're all looking at these texts very carefully to see if we see indications of who wrote them and when.
Yes. But what I'm getting at in terms of the sequence of events is whether Benjamin was born in Padan Aram or he was born in Bethlehem. It was after that point that we see Joseph having dreams because they were not living. They were not living there. They were elsewhere.
Yeah. Yep. Good stuff. All right, brother. Hey, I'm interested to see what you think about the Friedman book. Let us know. Maybe you can do a book review or something if you have time at some point.
Sure.
Good deal. Thank you, Damon. I appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
Nikita, how are you, my sister? Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, my dear. How are you?
I am doing wonderfully.
Wonderful. Thank you for the class. It was I love, I love Genesis, especially the first 6 chapters rather. But this was a perfect lead in from last week, the discussion that we had about stop deifying man and humanizing the Most High.
Yeah.
This goes straight to the ability to be redeemed. Not once bad, always bad, once good, always good. The good guys were black and the good guys were white and the bad guys were black. Reuben has a journey. He did something wrong. And like you said, with sleeping with his father's concubine, or however you want to put it, lesser wife, and trying to make up for that. And we all have this grudge-oriented outlook sometimes that people cannot be redeemable.
Yeah.
And I'm here to stand up for the former heathens, being a chief one myself. The Most High deals with each of us individually.
Yeah.
Some of us may have felt a need to be bad for whatever reason. And at some point we turn around. Now, some people are consistent with their wickedness. They love it. And you can tell that. But you can also see some promising behavior in others that that might not have been that, I tried it didn't work out for me. I mean, you just never know where someone is on their path. And there is only one righteous judge because he knows all situations of the problem or the issue.
Yep.
Right. So, you never hear anybody stand up and say, I believe I'm from the tribe of Reuben, because they've always judged, the worthy tribes, either Judah, Manasseh, Ephraim, Levi, of that nature. So that's why I despise labels so much, because you're guessing that those people whose tribe you want to belong to have no wicked people, but Kings and Chronicles tells us differently.
Yeah.
They have more power to persuade the rest of the tribes to wickedness as opposed not. And, those, all of Esau's children weren't evil.
Yeah.
All of Ishmael's children weren't evil.
All right. That's
right. The word says that from every nation and tongue, there will be those who will be redeemed. So it's not so much that we should always, the only label for me personally is righteousness.
Yeah.
I'm the righteous. It's just the most. I love him so much. I love him so much. And then there's the relationship praise. I had this aunt who was a absolute wonderful basketball player. I mean, I came from a small town, and to this day, this was about 40 years ago. She never played basketball with girls. So she played basketball with the guys, and that's how she honed her skill. And so when she, played with girls who might not have been as strong, and she didn't look strong, she just was, So, she did as much as she could, took that as far as she could. There was no WNBA at the time. So the coach that coached her was our high school coach.
Yeah.
And when he found out I was related to her, his eyes got all wild. Like, oh my goodness, I might have had another one. So he's like, come here for a minute, come here. So I go over there, he gives me this basketball, right? And he's like, do you know so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, that's my aunt. He's like, okay, here you go. And I looked at him really blankly and said, what am I supposed to do with this?
He didn't know he got a preacher. He didn't know he thought he had another basketball player.
Let me tell you, it didn't register when I walked in here how clumsy I was. So he took the ball from me, scratched his head, shook it, and just walked away. I'm like, yeah, act like you know.
Yeah.
No, that is her. That is not me. So just because, we want to hang a hook on our quote unquote more famous or better looked upon ancestors, thinking that stuff rubs off. And the Bible itself shows us that the Most High imbues each of us with something individual, because we never hear anything about Moses' kids.
Yeah, and there seems to be a concerted effort to cover that up. In fact, there's editorial evidence that changes to the sons of Moses happens later in the text in the book of Judges. We see it. One thing, let me just jump. One thing that you mentioned really struck me as you were talking, and that is that we do see these redemptions happen. So, for instance, you get Korah, who is a rebel against Moses, and the earth opens up in fire and so forth. But the text is very clear to say, but the sons of Korah did not die. And then later in the Bible, we see that these sons of Korah are responsible for some of the greatest poems, greatest songs of all time. And what I love about that is there's also a text where we often say it's better to be a gatekeeper in the house of my God, right? Because that was what they ultimately become, the sons of Korah. So they're like, we don't have to be a priest. We know our place, but that's a story of redemption. Even Egypt, the bad guy of the Exodus. What happens with Egypt? Well, you read Isaiah 19, and there is a special place in the prophet Isaiah's words about those Egyptians who are called the people of God. Same with Assyria. So we have to your point, we have to be careful to not judge a Reuben or anyone and say they're totally out. God used a harlot, Rahab, and dares people, the reader, to judge that person because they're the righteous one.
Yes, we're all capable of turning around. I mean, Ezekiel 33 and chapter 18. And I love him so much. In the day that a righteous man turns from his righteousness, okay? In the day that a wicked man turns from his wickedness, because you got to think how hard that is when someone who's loved righteousness considers it not to be worthy of its own love. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but they judge it, or they think that my former righteousness will save me.
Yeah.
No, but that's the reasoning of man. That's the reasoning of man. And the last point I wanted to speak of is the ability to know the Most High without the Hebrew text. So there was a chat going on, some words going on the YouTube channel that was saying something about the accuracy of the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They, for me, were the introduction to the Most High. They are not why I love him.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own reasons for what they do. For me, when I inquired of the Most High, due to understanding some of the things that happened in their lives, how the Most High shown himself to them, I was always open to him because of that. But had the Lord not, if I'd never known Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, do I feel that I would know the Most High? Yes, I do.
Right.
Simply because there are other, how can he judge the whole world if he never gave them a chance to know who he was? When I was younger and we were studying in Native Americans in school, probably because of Columbus Day or Thanksgiving or something. And they told me that they spoke to the Great Spirit. I loved that phrase.
Yeah.
Simply because he is, and it was singular. it was the Great Spirit. It was singular, not the council of, or the, he got help one way or the other, because he doesn't need it.
Right.
And it hones in on the fact that if you seek and you search for you look up in the sky, the Most High will make himself known to us and judge us by that which we know. So if Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did not exist, and I would still feel that I would have a relationship of the Most High, because you got to think about it. If they had a relationship with him without any words.
Yeah, they didn't have a Bible.
They didn't have a Bible. They didn't have any type of guidance other than Abraham at that point, and the Most High said this and gives him credit for it. He will teach his young ones. He will teach his young ones about me.
Yeah.
And they, his young ones, always had the choice as to whether or not to follow his teaching, like we all do.
Mm-hmm.
So if righteousness is the basis, bless his holy, woo, thank you, Lord. If righteousness is the basis, then we all have a shot. And as long as we live, with each breath we take, we have that choice to try to obtain it.
Amen. That'll preach, Nikita. That right there will preach.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate you.
Hey, I appreciate you. As always, thanks for your encouraging words. Have a beautiful Shabbat. Jump on back up if you think of something else.
All right, my brother. Talk to you later.
All right. Eric, talk to me, my friend. How are you?
I was going to say amen to everything going on with our preaching lady there.
That's right. We just need to turn on all the unmute everybody when Nikita gets up, and we'll turn this into a church, like the Church of the Hebrew Bible.
Amen. Amen. I was going to go back from the more philosophical general direction that we've been heading to. In these sources, scholarly sources and things, are there some that are done trying to, through whatever means, determine what was written when?
Yes.
And sort things out that way? And does that interweave with the documentary theorists? I mean, if this was all sat down at one time and the Yankees and the Southerners got together and we got to make a treaty, here's our best effort, or was it over more time and one redactor, two redactors, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you're hitting on one of the major pieces of the question. What we're dealing with here is at its heart a question of how did we get the Bible? How did we get the Bible? And then from that, like if you drew a circle and you wrote at the center of the circle, how did we get the Bible? And then all around that, one of the ideas that scholars have put forth is it looks like we have different sources that were pulled together. Even if you forget JEPD, documentary hypothesis, you forget all that. Throw that away just for a moment. When I read the book of Numbers, for instance, and I read that there is this ancient document, does it not say, and it quotes this ancient document that we no longer have, I realize that the Bible is composed of different ancient works. When I read of Moses completed in Deuteronomy 31, verse 9, verse 24 through 26, that Moses completed the writing to the very end of his scroll of the Torah, and he gave it, I know that there's a source. Where is that source? Who's writing this that tells me about it? Now, there was in the 19th century, this is the short answer, in the 19th century, there was a major thought that religion evolved from very primitive, the sacrificial cult and so forth, to something more sophisticated and of the heart. And in fact, Wellhausen is criticized in some modern circles in academia because of his approach. I mean, he's a man of the 19th century, right? So he also is very complimentary of the Gospels, and he looks at the law with a bit of down the nose, because he's influenced from his Christian upbringing. So he says some things which some might say are a little bit not ecumenical, not something that a modern scholar would say for certain. But beyond all that, we start to see that, well, how do we know that the religion began with something primitive like sacrifices and evolved to something better? It feels right to say that. But what if the Mosaic religion was different in that it stood apart for a lack of sacrifice, for instance? And we get traces of that. You know, like Jeremiah. Remember, in Jeremiah's time, supposedly they found the authentic scroll of Moses, and Jeremiah says that God didn't command sacrifices at first. So that kind of spins the academic idea of dating the sources on its head. Because if the original didn't have sacrifices and later sacrifices were added, then the whole scholarly world is kind of tipsy, in that sense. And I'm just kind of dancing around, but I think that the question still is before us. When do these different elements come in, and what is the dating
Right.
of these different elements? So, and that's what we're really trying to figure out here is not only can we determine when the source, well, first, can we separate the sources? How many sources are there?
Right.
Some give us a lot more than 4. Some say, well, there was an original, then, an early source, and then it's supplementary. It's called the supplementary hypothesis. Fascinating subject. In fact, I'm going to post, I think it's a 17-minute video by a guy. I think his YouTube channel is called Bible Charts or something. And it's really probably has well over 1 million views now, but it is wonderful. In just in a short time, he explains not only the documentary hypothesis, but other hypotheses as well. So we'll do that.
Right. Well, I was thinking that as this group is doing, was there not a group or groups over history in the ancient times doing this same thing? Because when it boils down to it, the Torah is the teachings of our Heavenly Father. I mean, the word,
Yeah.
I understand it means teachings.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the law, it's the teaching.
That's right.
And it boils back further into something of a root that means to shoot an arrow.
Yep.
And aren't we all shooting arrows? And you don't always hit the bullseye every time. So you got to have continuing.
That's right. And that's what I love about this group is we're all willing to say, hey, I respect where I came from,
Amen.
and I love the biblical text, and I realize we're not all in the same place, but we're willing to come together. I think Damon said, it was JJ for sure, said that, when we come together, this group is willing to entertain different alternative approaches. And, it's kind of a space where you can come and air out some of these ideas and work through some of the great difficult questions. So good stuff.
Yes. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, my brother. All right, we are going to tell our YouTube audience Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. And
Shabbat Shalom.
we hope that you join us again next week. And so if you're a member of the Yachad, come on over to the Zoom call. You don't have to have your camera on if that's what's keeping you from joining us. And we'll see you. Some of you will see Jonah and I Thursday night on our Torah Pearl special, but the rest of you, hopefully you will see you next Saturday if you missed that. All right.